Welcome to the Laws of Life podcast. I'm your host, Blanca, and today I have a visionary, influencer, and an entrepreneur I deeply admire, my friend, Zach Czerkas. Welcome, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing amazing.
It is so exciting to have you here at the studio in Davie, Florida. We met when you were on the stage of the Global Awakened Trinity Summit hosted by Kessa Gooden. And I remember seeing you for the first time on the stage, and I was blown away by your speaking skills. Is that one of your passions, to share your messages on the stage?
I think in time, you just learn how to progressively tell your story. I think at that specific time, she was asking me to speak on something about mindset, and then just like what that takes to like understand, broadening your dream building. So she was saying, what could you give somebody that is at any point in their journey? And I said that if you had your dreams, you would have to be able to articulate something that you haven't done before instead of doing something that you know or plan. Because if you do something that you know or what you plan, you're activating brain cells of recognition of the past, which would keep you in a linear plane. So instead of having the quantum leap, which would take you from this coordinate to this, you'd have to get into the dream state and create new brain cells of recognition, because that's what's going to create something that you have not yet accomplished. Because really it's about, not understanding how to get there, but just knowing the direction. If you're going to go to the top of the mountain, you got to envision yourself being at the top.
So that, in a sense, that's your quantum leap theory, and I'm fascinated by it.
That's like the Bob Proctor, Your Secret,
Secret just manifestation.
It's like people understand, like, there's a knowing doing gap in understanding the secret. So you can know the secret and you can read it, but actually doing it is applying the action steps and then understanding how to get in that peak state of mind. And then, getting into the unified field and then shifting your vibration, because really nothing externally you do is going to really change your internal state. You got to, register something within, and then that's what's going to take you to that next level. Because if you're vibrating at the level, you're going to match that reality, and then it's going to snap together.
What is your dream today?
I would say that my dream today is to, just elevate to the point where I can actually be a service to many, because service to many leads to greatness. So as I scale financially, I feel like one of the major things that I'm focused on is, people over profit. So if I can understand a system to the point where I can then give that back to somebody and say, hey, look, if you fix your credit and you have a Social Security in America, you can literally build your credit and then get to the point of asking for the money that you're entitled to, because that's where sovereignty comes from, is like understanding you don't need to work for something, you need to understand how to ask. And that's the big thing, is like, if you're really at any point in life, you can reset. You could be in your late 30s or 40s and not figure out credit. Next 30, 60, 90 days, build it, go ask for 50 to 150,000, 0% interest from one LLC, get a few LLCs, and all of a sudden be up 200 to 500,000 to be able to work with.
What is your advice of a person that doesn't have the financial education and experience that you have? Let's say they find the right consultant, they get their credit repaired, they're at an 820. What is the very first thing you think that entrepreneur should do? How should they spend the money specifically?
Okay, so there's, obviously you getting the money and doing something yourself. You could do real estate. I prefer crypto and M&A because I've done real estate. And now for me, because I've put money into the market and experienced time in the market, if I had an 820 and I didn't have to fix my credit, I would just get multiple LLCs and then ask for more money from the bank. Because if you can ask for more money, one, crypto has the same amount of users that the internet has right now. There's 566 million users. That's like having a conversation in the 90s if we were going to say, hey, is it a good idea to invest in Apple? Is it a good idea to invest in Microsoft or Netflix? Like, this is a true awakening for the Web 2 to transition into Web 3. So I would put a good chunk of it into crypto, because you have every 4 years a new cycle, and you're going to have basically this $3.3 trillion asset class have another 100 trillion get put into it within the next 5-10 years. And that means that there's $96 trillion of wealth that's going to get transferred and made. So for me, that's one thing to diversify into, but also because you can put it into crypto and then leverage getting a loan against it, you could then put that into something like M&A, which is mergers and acquisitions, where you could do an acquisition of a company and then be able to have the cash flow to be able to then utilize on your day-to-day basis.
So let's break that down. When you say buy LLCs, can you educate our audience who is the go-to to help them buy the LLCs, pick them? What does that journey look like?
I mean, you can start fresh LLCs on Google.
Just create a name? It's all about the setup of the entity?
Yeah, it's just the setup of an
going on
entity.
Sunbiz. And so they set up 3 LLCs.
Well, Sunbiz, if you're doing Florida specifically, but you go to Google and you could go to LegalZoom, you could go to anything. What I did is I set up a brand called King of Capital on Instagram, where then I'm going to take people through the step and then have them, if they need to go through the credit repair process and credit building process, and then have consultation so that we can help them get funding, and also the structuring of their LLCs.
So that's exactly the perfect solution, because so many entrepreneurs out there are starting from scratch, and so this is a company that you are currently running to help guide them through the whole journey.
Yeah, it's my consulting agency for being able to bring people into the credit repair plus credit building, proper structuring of an LLC, and then also getting grants. Because the biggest thing that people struggle with is they're thinking saving is going to do something, but that's the savings account is their spending account. They need to prioritize what money can I allocate from OPM, other people's money, which is the bank. Because as a king and a queen, there's no reason that you should be going out here struggling to try to go day to day. Even if you are, and you end up in the employee category like most of us do, you have to start understanding if you are an American citizen. Now, outside of America, that's a different topic. I haven't really, went down that rabbit hole with helping somebody that's from Canada or from another country being able to get funding. But usually it's the same structure. Most of these countries have a banking structure where they do have a social insurance number or a social security number that's just named something different. But they have to understand their relationship with the bank is their biggest wealth is essential for debt creation. And there's a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck, and they don't need to be if they understand just taking that leap of faith into the fear realm. Is everything risk? Yes. But there's also, risk if you just keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, and then basically having the definition of insanity. So you might as well take the risk in understanding mentorship and then having at least consultation so that when you do get the money, you're not having it burn a hole in your pocket and buying Gucci flip-flops.
Exactly. Well, the fact that you are a guide and we've known each other for several years now, anyone that would have the opportunity of being guided by you on this journey would be in good hands, because you are so well versed in these areas. What do you think the length of the journey is for the entrepreneur starting from ground zero to make some headway on this process?
If they don't have their credit fixed, really just depends on what's on their credit. Typically, it's a 30, 60, 90-day process. Now, I'm saying that it's the majority of people. It's not, that's why we consult with people and figure out where they're at with their credit. If they already have their credit right and they're at 800, you're talking about within 30, 60 days that you can get funding. And you can go create a brand new LLC and then get funding on multiple LLCs. So that's the biggest thing, is understanding your personal guaranteed credit is then going to be leverageable in lines of credit when you create these LLCs.
And you were speaking earlier about crypto being one of your number one, major priorities in terms of investing. Do you see crypto as a better investment than real estate?
Okay, so in my journey of understanding diversification of my portfolio, when I did real estate, I was zealous. I found a very beat up house. It was a 7-bedroom house near the capital of Wisconsin in Madison. And it was positioned for me because I was living in the unit and then also repairing it. So I found a multifamily and I figured out what a land contract was. So I went on Google, printed off a document, and then signed a document, got it notarized at the post office, and handed somebody, $40,000 in cash, and then the same day got the keys and then took over a loan that was only 2.9% interest.
Wow.
So I stepped into the understanding like, okay, I wanted to do real estate, but after I went through that journey of 2.5 years and I fixed the property, of course I sold it at a net profit, which is, a lot of people get into real estate and they don't, make a net profit because they don't have mentorship. I was, my intuition was on because I went into a multifamily right away. I knew that other tenants could pay for my mortgage, and I lived humbly in the attic as I started to gentrify the whole building, which it needed everything. It was 110 years old. It needed knob and tube electric. It needed the carpets pulled out. A lot of the walls were lab and pull, like plaster. So as soon as I would knock one ceiling, I realized that there was, 25 bags of construction bags of like insulation and asbestos, and it had old linoleum and a bunch of hoarded stuff in there from the last tenants because it wasn't taken care of properly. It had some mold damage, some water damage. I polished a turd. But, you have that filter being zealous, like, oh, I never owned a home before, and I was in the construction field, so I already was there for a restoration estimate on painting. So I was already like looking at it like, oh, don't worry about the $16,000 bid estimate that I'm doing. Just give me the property. And it just so happened that he had lived 2 years, or he lived 2 hours away. So like for the last 2 years, he actually was like spending less and less time with his wife. And the only reason he got that property is because his son was going to college. So the last 2 years, he had been working towards just getting rid of it because his son had already, graduated and got out of the house. So he had some problems with the tenants, not paying rent and having some subsidized housing, like the vouchers. One of the tenants downstairs actually was on a government voucher, and she would pay 1 month with the voucher, and the next month somehow it wouldn't show up. And then, it was an interesting situation. And I saw why he was trying to, just offload it, because it was an easy transition for him to just be like, all right, well, this isn't my problem anymore.
Well, you can see that you are innovative and you are creative, and leveraging the power of your network as being a contractor and then turning it into a real estate deal.
Which, by the way, I sold and put it all into crypto.
So
which could have been risk, but really because I had time in the market and I had that first leg up, I had money that I put in the market and I saw 2 cycles. So by the second cycle, which was 4-year period in crypto, I already knew like this was a definitive thing I could go put an all in on. I wasn't like, oh, hey, I already had that intuition that the market was at a low because I had been kind of looking at it, engaging it like, okay, this is a good time.
So who is Zach Czerkas? How did you turn out to be a financial authority, influencer, consultant? Let's go back and take a step back to the beginning. Where were you raised?
So I was raised in Wisconsin.
Okay.
In the country. I got into construction. I was in the restaurant industry.
What did your parents do for a living?
My parents were both laborers. So my dad was in construction, but he never ended up becoming his own, company owner. I feel like that's maybe why I had that a little bit in my background.
Okay.
But I transitioned into, instead of being, employee, I became self-employed. And then because I had self-employment income coming in, and it wasn't crazy. It was, like 6 figures. That allowed me to transition into understanding investing, at least putting some money in the market. And when I had the aha moment of time in the market, I was like, oh, $1 can turn into 10 with me doing nothing. I had that aha moment turned on forever. Because
How old were you when you had that aha moment?
That aha moment was at like 26 years old.
That's, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you today?
How young am I?
How young are you?
I'm 34 today.
That's wonderful. When's your birthday?
May 6th, so it was just a few weeks ago.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Okay, so your dad was in the construction business, so that was an influence. And
Yep.
what did your mother do? Full-time mom? Did she work?
My mom was a full-time laborer. She just worked in, food industry, and then she ended up getting into the mailing company in insurance, but not doing insurance rep, just more so on the employee side. So I really had that like breakaway from my family's background because I started doing personal development. And the personal development started happening because I got pulled into the industry network marketing, which everybody typically considers the pyramid industry. They consider it, oh, you're in that thing. And, direct sales and MLM and multi-level marketing is actually the most dominant form of how to, build a people-based business for affiliate distribution. I mean, Amazon's affiliate distribution, Walmart's affiliate distribution. They just call it different things, but everything has a distribution model. And I believe that's probably one of the strongest suited things is a business of people. So if you want to take a business from 100 million to a billion, of course, you're going to need the right people involved, not necessarily just employees, but independent train of thought, because then independent train of thought creates more distribution in different parts of the world.
So we have a lot in common because you definitely believe that the key to success in business is having the right network in terms of the team, the employees, the customers. Everything for you comes down to relationships, human relationships. And you believe that your work in, as you call it, personal development is the key to developing a successful relationship?
Yeah, because I would say that the season of separation that I had to do to get away from my parents was to be able to develop the inner fire, because that pilot light wasn't very strong with the background and the environment that I was in. So when I had that degree of separation, and then I started putting myself in the room where there was people that are more entrepreneurial spirit, that entrepreneurial spirit actually awoken within myself. And then it allowed me to be able to understand, I'm not in a cult. I'm not in something that somebody said, oh, why are you doing that thing? I was actually going to these regional events. I was going to these national events. And even if it wasn't giving me the financial, like maybe I was paying into it at first, but the reality is you're worth it. And if you're going to go hang out with people that are students, you're going to have a student awareness. If you're going to go hang out with people in distribution, I started to get the distribution mindset. So I started to separate from just being in Wisconsin. I started to go to different states that were more prevalent for having, bigger sales organizations in Vegas and Texas and California and Miami and, going international. So it actually stretched my awareness because I was around people that were actually on a higher income bracket that were understanding passive income. And interestingly, the direct sales industry started paying people in crypto. So you had the option then to get paid in Bitcoin before everybody else, which is interesting that the top of the world in sales profession started paying a lot of their sales organization people in this industry in cryptocurrency. Before it was all of a sudden, the Bitcoin being on the reserve currency for the United States.
Is that how you got your first exposure to the world of crypto? Because of the network marketing and getting paid in that currency, so you had to pay attention?
My first exposure to cryptocurrency was me sitting in a basement, smoking weed, playing Minecraft when it was $100 a share, and we were buying weed from the dark web and then sending it to our basement and then sitting and playing video games.
So that was the first primary need for the money.
Yeah. So it was really more of a lucrative way for us to go down the rabbit hole of being in a state that wasn't legal, and we were purchasing it from the internet going, hey, we need this to get our weed.
Well, listen, every chapter is a part of the journey, but I'm fascinated by your pilot light, as you called it, coming on. Let's drill down on personal development. Your practices as a visionary that made you who you are today. Could you tell us what some of the practices you learned by studying your mentors are?
I mean, just in general, having an understanding that if you are able to listen to somebody that is at a higher frequency financially, you can learn from their experiences. So if you're able to access a phone or the internet, even if you could go to the library, you can learn from books and history, and you could also learn from the internet from hearing testimonies of people and their experience, because that life experience is transferable so that you can at least get insight on a potential blueprint to say, hey, this person did it and I can too. So then you're able to just hear another person's point of view, which should then shift your perception to say it's possible. Because then if you're able to, like when I lived in Wisconsin, nobody was really driving around Bentleys and Rolls Royce and Lamborghini. I come to Miami, it's way more prevalent. It's like how many people actually are living like this? It's like a video game. You feel like you're in GTA 6. Because, you know, you see the potential and you see people with yachts and you see all this, you know, this money, it's flourishing. And then you can obviously go to different parts of Florida that aren't doing as well. But I got pulled into the conference level awareness because I was going to events, and where these events are, they're always in nice places. So then you get exposed to something. And once you open Pandora's box, you really can't go back. I go back to Wisconsin. I'm like, oh, it's gray skies. There's not Lamborghinis, there's not Rolls Royce, there's not Bentleys. You know, I need to go back to where I'm getting inspired, because that we go back to, you know, knowing and planning and dreaming, right? If I'm just doing what I know and plan and I keep wanting different results and expecting different results, but I keep doing the same thing, I'm going to be on a linear path because I just keep doing the same thing and keep hanging around the same minds. And birds of a feather flock together. How am I going to, you know, pretend to be an eagle if I'm a chicken and I'm hanging out in the chicken coop?
Couldn't say it better myself. You gotta surround yourself with the people that you admire and want to elevate to their level. They always say, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You agree with that?
Yeah, of course.
What do you remember the first conference you went to?
So the first conference I went to was actually for World Ventures. It's the "You Should Be Here" sign. That's a travel company that bought travel in bulk. I got like 12 people in. They were all my friends. They couldn't afford the subscription for the auto subscribe, and they all dropped off. But I was so excited about these people that were traveling, and I saw people traveling, and I was like, man, it would be so cool to just travel for a living. And I went to a regional after I went to a house meeting, but the first meeting was actually in a house where somebody was showing us a presentation and saying, hey, there's an opportunity to leverage people in a business. To be able to understand business, you have to understand people, and you might as well not do 100% effort of yourself. You should have 1% effort of 100 people. So you could get people to do bare minimum effort, but as long as you had 1% of 100 people, it'd be 100%, you know, to the, you know, magnify yourself by 100 people would be like quantifying what was possible, because you just have that much more reach.
So I'm fascinated by your first network marketing experience and the excitement that you felt when you recruited them as affiliates. How did you pitch them?
I mean, at the time, I was like 23. So I really didn't have the real world experience or the traveling posts or anything that was really exciting, or the car or anything. So it was just like, hey, these guys have that. So I was leveraging somebody else's success and then having a mentor and saying, hey, you know, just because I don't have the results, let me show you what this person has. So it was really just leveraging somebody else, and network marketing, they call it edification. So then I could leverage the expert and then let the expert sell them. And if you have two people in the room that are yes, and the third person's a no, it's very easy to sway because of mirror neuroning. We're both shaking our head yes. The third person, unfortunately, has an unfair advantage because we're both broadcasting yes on them.
What do you think is the key to recruiting an affiliate?
Okay, so this is interesting, right? Because 80% of the market are customers and they don't want to sell anything. And then 15% are part-timers, and then 5% are actually full-time, you know, sales distribution people. So I found it challenging to be able to take somebody through the customer journey and then get them to be a full-timer right away. So the biggest thing was actually just to get the customer and then intrigue them to say, hey, by the way, there's auto ship that's costing you $150 a month. If you refer 3 people, it would be free. So it's just literally through the power of suggestion to get the customer to open up the potential door to being a part-timer, because then that part-time thing could end up becoming in a transition of them seeing the potential of being full-time. So it was more so just seeding somebody a little bit by little bit in the personal development realm. It's not hard to get somebody to understand the value when they go there and see it in person. If you do a virtual, it's a little bit harder for them to get that community. And then obviously with COVID, it went more virtual. So actually it did expand. But I think it's just really getting people in the success environment, and that success environment allowing their internal temperature to increase, because really their pilot light's going to turn on by being near the fire. And by being near the fire, I mean being near the 15% and the 5%. Because those people are the ones that are, the pack leaders. And, the pack leaders are hurting the customer base.
What today, in today's right now, is your number one approach to building relationships with people?
I mean, the first thing I do is I try to make sure that I can calibrate what bracket they're in, because I want to understand if people are in the 33% that are not quite at the level that I'm at, and not that they're lesser, they're just not where they need to be in the journey quite yet. And they could be at any age. So you have 33% that are really like figuring it out. They're in the lower income bracket. They haven't figured out credit. So I try to figure out where their money paradigm is. So then I can assess where I can, build value and build relation. Because I don't want to just meet somebody and say that they don't have enough value to be able to transact in, communicating with me. But there's obviously a time and space for you to be able to, honor a certain amount of time allocated. So if I find somebody that's 33% above the 33 that is like me, that has the same level of success, obviously those are people that are going to be more like my friends, because I'm going to relate to them the most. And then the 33% that are 10x or above me, I'm going to pull my inspiration from, and I'm going to try to learn. And maybe my friend group also has a correlation to having similar mentorship from these top 33%. And then you have a 1% it's God. So you want to make sure that obviously you understand when meeting and doing new business relations with people, you're gauging where they're at. I like to do a money paradigm by saying, hey, how much did you make net last year? That way I can gauge if they're a 6 or 7 figure or 8 figure or 9 figure person, if they're willing to disclose that, because then I'm like, okay, like this is the bracket of where this person is, and I can allocate how much time I can spend with them and what kind of conversations we're going to talk about. Because I'm not going to have a conversation with somebody that's in the lower 33% about, hey, I just bought a brand new house, or I just closed a deal. I just got a $300,000 wire sent to me, because I don't want to make it sound like I'm bragging. And if I talk to my same level, they're going to be like, oh yeah. If I talk to the level above that, they're going to be like, oh, do better. They're going to be like, you think you're doing something? Well, I got a wire for $6 million. And then you're just like, okay, now you're making me think I got to get to the next level.
That's interesting. So you look at currently in today's present day, you look at a connection, a potential connection as falling into one of those 4 levels. Mm-hmm. Level A, level B, which is your level C, a level above your level, and the 1%. Is that a fair
The 1%
summary?
would be God.
God?
There's only 3 levels.
There's only 3 levels.
The first level is 33% that's below you. Obviously not lesser humans, but
we'll just call it level A.
Yeah, level A.
Okay.
And then level B, that's the same level.
That's your level.
That's the same level as you financially.
Okay.
And then you're going to be at level C, where they're literally 10x or more what your potential is. So you're like, if you're a 7-figure person, this person's already at 9.
So Grant Cardone would be obviously at the top level, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I know he is one of your mentors, one of the people you look up to. And I do as well. I've been to many of his conferences and watched a lot of information that he's provided. How has the Grant Cardone community added value to your life as an entrepreneur?
Well, personally, I have done a lot of their workshops so that I could understand sales, marketing, and understanding marketing is senior to sales. So if you understand marketing and you understand systems and understanding CRMs, and you can set up a funnel, then you can then get into buying leads from any type of industry that you like. And that's really the automation process that's going to take you from 6 figures to 7, if you understand media buying correctly and having a presented offer that's polished and packaged. Because it really doesn't take much for a 6-figure person to teach other people that aren't 6-figure people how to make 6 figures. and then sell a course for $1,000 or $2,000 to make $7,000. Because then you're positioning yourself then to become an authority on a 6-figure level, which is a very obtainable level, but for majority of the population, it might not be. So then you're giving them a system, an easy step-by-step, which is then better than the traditional route of college in the sense where you have to pay into something where it might be a lower barrier to entry that's then going to give you the action steps for you to be able to implement some of the similar industries that you're looking for. If you wanted to get into being in the construction industry, you could sell easy how-to guide on how to set up your LLC, how to go online and buy leads from Google, which you'd be surprised how many people in the construction industry don't understand that they can literally type in, how do I get leads for painting? How do I get leads for plumbing? How do I get leads for electric? And then they go and work for somebody instead of literally just investing into getting the leads, and then they got to step into that role as a distributor again, right? So then you have the majority of the reason why they're in the 80% is because they're customers and they just don't use their imagination to think outside of the box to be a distributor, which ends up being sales. So it kind of correlates back to why network marketing ended up kind of opening that horizon for me, because I understood that I needed to sell.
Of course. Well, you have a natural charisma. You're very articulate. You're very eloquent. You know your subject matter. What other mentors have developed you into the person that you are today?
So I really like subconscious reentrainment. So I got a lot of inspiration from Bob Proctor in The Secret.
Okay.
He's already passed away now, but I had the opportunity to go to LA for the paradigm shift. And we did that because of our leadership in network marketing. So we were taking up 60% of that room. It wasn't all network marketers that were learning this, but it was just on the basis of subconscious reentrainment and understanding everything that you seed your subconscious has the potential to shift your paradigm. So Bob Proctor's a big key role. I also like Tony Robbins.
Well, before we go on to Tony, I want to dig a little deeper on The Secret.
Mm-hmm.
I was told by a friend to watch The Secret every single day for 30 days. And I did see an immediate advancement in my ability to manifest a vision.
Mm-hmm.
What was your specific experience by being exposed to The Secret?
I mean, here's what's interesting, right? You have a lot of people that are exposed to The Secret and it still doesn't work for them. That's where it comes down to the closing the knowing doing gap. That's the action steps to be able to reprogram what's in your field. Because unfortunately, on a genetic level, you're either at a disadvantage or at an advantage. And I firmly believe that wealth ends up being a genetic thing. So when you activate these, fields of awareness in your consciousness, you have an energy body of a paradigm for your money paradigm. The only reason you're making your current state of money is because you don't understand how to make your annual income into your monthly. And that's just a paradigm shift. You don't have to externally do any more physical work. You can think the thoughts as much as you like, but if you're not internalizing the belief in your self-talk and you haven't cleansed your field on the unified field, your DNA is putting you in a disposition because now you're just talking and talking and talking. But the thing is it's an unseen rewiring that you have to do because it's the subconscious that's always listening. So people root back to what their habits of their words are, speaking, oh, I don't have enough money for that. I can't afford that. I need to make sure that I'm safe and secure at my job. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen, people have the video where somebody pulls up in a Lamborghini to the people in the food industry and offers them 10 to 30,000 in cash to quit their job. And sometimes they even offer them 40 or 50, not realizing the potential of them just taking that and then going to another job. They don't,
They just want that security. They want that safety.
Yeah.
Well, what is your advice on how to change that paradigm? I think that's one of the biggest human questions we face. How do we get people to start believing in themselves?
I would say it's always your peers. You have to change your circle of influence because it's the people around you that are speaking life or death with the power of the tongue into your reality. So I would rather surround myself with strangers that are speaking life into me, saying, "Oh, you're doing great," versus criticizing you or going to work and then saying, "Oh, I'm tired," and then just talking about work and then going to the bar. Because if you have enough people to go to the bar with to go have drinks, you need to have that many people that want to go into business with you or talk about business or talk about larger numbers. In general, I think a general rule of thumb for getting more money and attracting more money is looking at bigger numbers. If you're going to look at, for instance, the crypto market, knowing that there's 15 million different cryptos, but you know that the asset class is $3.3 trillion, how often do you look at $1 trillion market? Or do you look at stocks and then know that Apple's got $3.6 trillion in it? And then understanding these evaluations of where people are storing their money, where the money then can be moved. Unfortunately, people have this relationship with the bank where they go get the job and then they leave the money in the bank and then that's a spending account. It's not an investing account. So I think one of the first paradigms would be understanding your money should be invested, because the more that you can invest, you can then save it for a later day where it can appreciate because there's other people's money moving your money. And then also, obviously, just doing a regimen of personal development regularly where you're listening to 7 or 8 or 9 figure people. So then you start to get the filter and you start to calibrate your perception, because your perception is going to shift when you see somebody's lens of their point of view.
Absolutely. I mean, and for those who can't afford personal development, YouTube has hours and hours and hours of available personal discovery, personal development resources. There's really no excuse not to study, right? There's no excuse not to go to the library, not to read, not to self-educate. But I have to go back to one of the things you said, which really lit up my heart, which was the people around you help change the paradigm. So if you're with negative people, you're not going to be able to get out of that money block, so to speak. If you're with positive people, it definitely is a stepping stone. What other communities besides the Grant Cardone community would you recommend to our audience?
Well, other than the Bob Proctor, the Grant Cardone, I like the Tony Robbins, because Tony Robbins is one of the best neurolinguistic programmers in the world. Neurolinguistic programming, NLP, is hypnosis. It's understanding, reprogramming yourself with words and actions. He talks about the reticular activator system, which is priming yourself to be in state. The first time that I met Tony Robbins was in Miami at the Miami Heat Stadium, and 13,000 people that just met, or obviously some people there were with their own organizations, but you literally walked out and there's 13 lines of coals where he literally convinces that many people to go out and step on orange coals. And you become a firewalker, and then they try to sell you a firewalker t-shirt. My feet are permanently sweating when I speak on that, because
you walked on the coals?
Of course.
Damn.
Yeah, you walk out, you prime yourself, you're instructed to look away from the coals, because then you're not visually seeing that they're orange. Even though I looked at them and I was like, those are really orange. Really orange. They're not brown, they're not black.
Wow.
So they say, verbalize something that's going to neurolinguistically program you to think the opposite. You're looking away, so you're not directionally looking at it, and then you're saying cool moss. So when you say cool moss, you could almost essentially feel what it would feel like to go step on some cool grass or some moss, because you know what it feels like if you've experienced that as a kid. So you're then triggering neurons to then prime your reticular activator system. So then you're then at least associating something to being oh, I'm not, you can't think, oh, I'm going to go get burned, because then you're going to get burned. Now, there's a small percentage of people that actually get them stuck between their toes, or they'll get little burns. But I was one of those, people that was out there banging on my chest going, yes, 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 yes. And then looking away, even though when he said, don't go out and look at the coals, I looked at it, but I still was priming myself and saying, I was oh, I looked at it, but I'm good. Yes, yes, yes.
Wow.
So I walked, it was 8 steps, and then they put some water on your feet. But afterwards, I was my feet are black, but I didn't get burned. And I was like, wow, that's a crazy thing to understand, the power of your words and your body and your reticular activator system to be able to just program yourself to be able to do things, against what you thought was possible. So in network marketing, they're always doing subconscious reentrainment, sales, relationships, marketing, building your brand, and then understanding these, multifaceted things for you, just having, more coming of age of becoming an entrepreneur and being more self-employed.
What's the number one law of life, though, that came out of walking across hot coals?
If you put your mind to something and you are, dialed in, you can do anything that you really put your mind to, because even if it seems like it's impossible, it's possible if the facts don't matter, but the attitude's right.
So mind state is everything in business and in life.
Yeah, I would say that mindset is 95% of success. It's almost like the spiritual side of success. If we're, living in a spiritual realm, why wouldn't you work on your internal state more than trying to just always be thinking more physical?
Do you see yourself vibrating at your highest level of happiness today?
I feel like I'm getting better and better. And as I'm coming of age, it is very interesting to get to the next Nimbus cloud, because then you just look down and you're like, man, there's a lot of gratitude in the journey and not knowing the how, but just appreciating, the direction of knowing where you're going. So as long as you have a definitive chief aim of, hey, I'm going towards $1 million a month, and then knowing, like, if I had $1 million a month, I would be tithing, 10% and doing 100,000 a month that I'm giving away to charities or giving away to people to help people. If I had $1 million a month, this is the type of cars that I would have in my garage in multiple locations. These are the type of vacations that I would be taking. This is what I would be doing for my family and for my potential family that I'm creating, and what kind of clothes I'd wear, what kind of jewelry would I have. Those are the things that you have to think with clarity, because it's going to take more mental processing of energy to not be definitive. If you're very general and vague, what do you even need the money for?
Exactly.
You don't know. So why would you deserve it?
Well, what is your law of life on how to phrase the request to the universe? In other words, do you recommend that when I get $1 billion, I will donate 10% to charity? Does that give us a higher chance of winning?
I'd say that going and donating 10% of everything that you do net, and the law of, giving, is already a law. The law of tithing is a law. So
Okay.
when you start to give, you start to realize that it's like water. So if you can give to people that are less fortunate than you, the 33% that are below you, and you start to just give and give and give and give and give, it's always going to boomerang back, because then you're going to understand it comes back. So on a universal level, you really just got to practice understanding, generosity takes giving, even if you don't have that much to give. So even if you're only making, $50,000 a year, if you still gave $5,000 away, or you gave some of your time away, likely that's going to boomerang back to you, because money's not the end all be all for everybody. But I do think it's essential for people to have their financial awareness increase in time, just to have a better, footing in life. And number one, understand credit and understand funding, because that one thing, I think, was the biggest switch for me. I was just like, wait a minute, why don't I have this American Express card that everybody else has? Why don't I have, a $50,000 Chase card? Or, why don't I have US Bank or Bank of America or PNC and have this credit card stack that I see somebody flash? I want that many credit cards. Even if I didn't really know what to do with it right away, it would just be cool to have $1 million in credit line. Because then at any point, if you came to me with an opportunity, I have the ability to execute. And that is really the ability to understand one thing: build your credit, have financial, backing from the bank, because Uncle Sam's got your back. You get the government on your side, you get the bank on your side, you get government grants. They want you to be your full form and be an entrepreneur. They want you to employ other people. They want you to give back. It's just really the selfishness of me, my job, my benefits versus how can I help you get benefits? How can I help provide jobs? It's a transitional period of like how many people you're looking to impact instead of just looking out for yourself.
In order to go through that chapter of financial growth and stability, they must have the foundational mental health and mindset to believe that once they get the money, it's possible for them to then grow in business, real estate, crypto, get grants, all these ideas. So do you agree that belief is the foundation of the first stepping stone of the journey?
I would say that there's two different paths of understanding belief. Faith and fear both determine that you believe in something that's unseen. It's your choice. So if you want to be fearful and not take any risk, you're probably going to believe that you can't do it and you won't. And the same person that says I can will figure it out along the way. So belief is at the core of what you repeatedly tell yourself. There is a bridge that has an arc, right? And there is a stone in the middle called the keystone. Without the keystone, which is belief, you would not be able to hold the structure of this bridge. So understanding repetition is the keystone. The only reason why you believe your name is because your parents said it over and over. So you might as well tell yourself you're over and over, money comes to me in increasing quantities on a continuous basis, easily and effortlessly. I have wealthy business partners that are ambitious, that are working with me globally. I have new money coming to me on a continuous basis from multiple sources of income. And then show appreciation and so show gratitude. Another key in this belief system is being able to oscillate on the correct frequency to repair your DNA, to remove the blockages within the unified field. In the unified field, if you just look up the structure of emotions and understand there's a scale of them, and they literally have broken down, there's a Hertz level for hate and greed and lust, and then it gets to more neutrality, and then it goes pride, and then it goes to bliss or exuberance or excitement or authenticity or love. You have these scalar energies that you can then resonate with. Gratitude will then change your belief. So if you could just do daily gratitude for being grateful and being present in the present moment, you're then going to internalize these frequencies that you can prime yourself and get into state, back to Tony Robbins. So if you were to try to shift your belief without doing some of this internal work, you would want to have it with the internal work saying, I'm grateful now, I'm happy now, I'm exuberant now, I'm in a blissful state now, I'm at peace now, I'm at ease. Because then we just spoke the spirit and the word of the world, right? In the beginning was the word, and that's your world. So you're speaking and invoking the thought. You don't just want to think something because the word itself is imbuing the prophecy, and then you're internalizing it because your subconscious is listening, and you're speaking to the cellular level, and you're reprogramming your DNA, and you're saying, I understand my situation is challenging right now, but there are no problems other than the ones that I think and speak. I'm going through a challenging moment right now financially, but I'm grateful that I have my family. I'm grateful that I have new business partners that are ambitious and wealthy wanting to work with me. I'm grateful for being able to see new opportunities. I'm grateful for new money to come to me and flow like water easily and effortlessly. That is the state that's going to take you into the dream. We're going to go back to the 3 types of goals and understanding what you heard me speak about. You have to understand where you're setting your goals. You don't want to do something that you know are your plan. You don't want to stay in the past. You want to go to the dream state. You want to say, I'm grateful now. And you want to be able to pull that reality and internalize it. And another part of the secret is understanding feeling, because it's not thinking things, even though, thinking into results ends up happening. it's about speaking it and internalizing it from the heart. Because if you can take your attention from above to center yourself and then get gratitude internalized, that's where your heart space is way more powerful. And then you're going to transmit from the mind, because you need the brain heart coherence. And also there's the Dantian, which is supposed to be like your sexual center. So you have the three main centers that you're supposed to really get in line, because sexual energy is actually a very powerful thing to tap into. You want to pull that energy to your heart space and then broadcast out. Sometimes people with The Secret get too mental. They get too academic.
Too visual.
They get too visual. And then they don't internalize the feeling. And then they forget the gratitude. They forget to get their internal state, to rewire their body, to prime themselves to be able to broadcast on the frequency that's possible.
Have you studied meditation as well?
So I have studied transcendental meditation, biofeedback, hypnosis, and one of my favorite meditations right now is called the Gateway Experience. So this is a government document that was released by the CIA. And the reason why I started going down this rabbit hole is because I wanted to understand how to increase my brain waves permanently so that I could learn how to astral project. So the CIA released this document on Google, and it's on the CIA.gov, where you can understand that the Robert Monroe Institute actually trained the CIA to do astral projection and remote viewing. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm diving down the rabbit hole of understanding higher faculties and understanding that I'm a spirit, I should be able to have this power, because it's in all of us. Why wouldn't I want to be able to, remote view and go to Paris right now? And just because I said Paris, there's a potential that you and I just went there right now, right? With our astral bodies.
You got the jet waiting?
I flew there, but I don't know if I was in a plane. I just went, in the astral plane. But like when I say Paris, have you ever been there?
I have.
Okay, so when I said Paris, were you on the ground or were you in the sky?
It's a great question. I was on the ground.
So you were on the ground because you've been there.
Yes.
Because I've never been there yet.
Oh.
I was in the sky looking at the Eiffel Tower, but I wasn't in a plane. So that's interesting, right?
Very.
Have you been to Dubai?
No. It's one of my dreams to go.
Okay, but what came to mind when I said Dubai?
Whenever I think of Dubai, I just think of just the most beautiful restaurants and city streets and shops, just the ultimate in luxury.
Did you potentially see the Burj?
No.
Which is the tallest building? You ever seen that?
I've seen it in one of the reality series.
Okay. So I was kind of gauging where your actual like remote viewing, like, because like, I don't know if you've ever practiced it, but that's a part of it. Like you could literally go someplace in your mind and then send your energy there. And then when you get really good at it, you should be able to go into a room, go behind a closed door, and then read what's on a piece of paper and then come back to your body and then tell you what's on there.
Wow.
So that's where I started getting into meditation and doing it regularly, because I am fixated on this understanding that I can astral project. I can leave my body and I can come back. And if I can go someplace in my sleep, why shouldn't I be able to do that while I'm in a waking state? So that's one of the things that I'm mastering.
Wow.
I would say the last like 8 months I've been doing the Gateway Experience. It's been interesting because I feel like my intuition is getting stronger every day. And as I'm present and I begin to become more still, and you look into the neurology, I did have an EEG machine reading recently, and they were telling me that my gamma waves and my theta waves were higher than usual, because usually you have beta and alpha. So you're able to register, and I noticed that only through reading the actual science behind it, I was like, well, actually, they did say in the document that it increases your amplitude and frequency of your brain waves permanently, which then allow you to be able to have the higher oscillation and then get into state of theta or gamma. And usually that's not as common. And beta state would be considered like, I want to say the peasant state, because we're all sleepwalking. You're literally sleepwalking in a waking state. But if you're able to slow down your brain waves and get to theta and then get to delta, you could consciously heal yourself. Now it's interesting that after delta, it gets to gamma, and then it like spikes and then goes way faster than beta and alpha. But I think the sweet spot that I've learned is, high alpha and theta is considered the wealth frequency.
Okay.
That's in neurology if you're beta, alpha, theta, delta, gamma.
Who taught you about the waves and the different?
I just went on Google.
You just learned that yourself?
Yeah. I went on Google because I liked neurology and understanding, when you start getting into breath work and meditation, I was like, oh, what kind of state of mind are we in when we're meditating? You're typically more in an alpha state when you start to regulate your breath, which is a lost art as well. If you start to just consciously breathe and you're...
Oh, absolutely. During COVID, I had a meditation coach, Sunny Arfa, who I'll definitely introduce you to at a future opportunity. And she taught me a lot of breathing exercises, meditation, the power of affirmation. And I know you will enjoy meeting her. Do you still do affirmations to register these thoughts?
So I have, I have an affirmation on my phone because obviously it's blasted in your subconscious. So
I like that affirmation.
It says, I'm so happy and grateful now that I'm worth 20 million liquid, and I'm so happy and grateful now that I'm making 1 million every single month. And then it's literally an imposed account of mine. It's Bitcoin because, my first, 7 figures was, realizing that, I could leave it in my account and it would grow because I got into Bitcoin at 3,000 a share. But my account had the most gain. So then I just altered my own account with my little picture there, which is interesting because that's when I started network marketing. You can see me up in the corner. So that little picture of me is me holding out a phone going like this saying, hey, this is Bitcoin. And if you zoom in on that picture and it's never changed, which is crazy because at the time I was just literally staging the photo. I was up on a stage because I was in network marketing for financial literacy for crypto stocks and Forex. It was called iMarkets Live. So I transitioned from the travel industry to the financial literacy products and digital products. But I was on stage for my first event in Florida, and I was in a suit and I was going like this, like, yeah, look at Bitcoin. At the time, I didn't own any Bitcoin. So it was like interesting that I was showing myself, and I took that picture because I looked back at it and I was like, man, Bitcoin's literally 4,000 a share, and I'm showing myself before I even owned any of it. But because I was subconsciously seated in those events that were buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, all of a sudden I just ended up acting at some point. And that was even knowing that, it went from 100 and then it ended up being at like 1,000 to 3,000. And I still didn't end up buying it because I just didn't have the money. But then when I did put my first 10,000 in, it went to 50,000.
Oh, wow.
It actually made me like, oh yeah, I'm on top of the world. I'm gonna buy a house. I'm like, I'm smart. I'm at Christmas, the only one looking at my phone like, Mom, you gotta get some of this. And they're like, that's the only thing you talk about, and it's not real. It's for people in drugs and they're not doing good things. And I'm just like, whatever. But I went to 50,000. I was like, yes. I didn't want to be like, I told you so. I was just gonna go try to buy a house, but it smashed back down and went to 10. And I didn't have the opportunity to actually reap the benefit. But it was my first wave. It was my first domino.
Your first experience with the crypto.
But I pulled it out of the market out of fear.
Oh.
But the interesting thing is my intuition kicked back in. I was still in network marketing. They still kept saying, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. I ended up putting 60,000 in. And that's when I had my first leg up where it was like 1.3 million. And then I was like, oh man, this is great.
What did you do when it went to 1.3 million? Did you take yourself out to dinner? Did you reward yourself?
What I did is I actually ended up getting into the property. And then I ended up buying a few things. And then I didn't get it at the cycle top because I didn't understand the full cycle yet. I think I only ended up getting around 700,000 because it smashed back down.
Okay.
But what it did give me is that second domino of like, okay, now I can prepare every 4 years because there's an opportunity for you in stock, maybe every 10 to 12. In crypto, there's every 4. You have a lot of cycles that are going to be an open opportunity for you. If you're just getting started and you think you're late to the game because you're getting Bitcoin at 107,000 today, just know there's potential now with regulation for all of these new people that are institutions wanting to come in and buy your Bitcoin. And if your Bitcoin is only 100,000, let's just put this in perspective. You go buy a house, it's $100,000. Is it going to appreciate to $1 million? And
Probably
what time
not.
period would it take?
I would think it would take at least 25 to 30 years to
Okay.
get close to that.
So let's just say Trump.
Just guessing.
So Trump put it on the United States balance sheet. You have companies like Tesla that did that at 20,000 a share. Now, if you are watching one of the publicly most richest man that's worth $400 billion back in the day, buy his company, have 20,000, I think 10 or 20,000 Bitcoin on his public balance sheet for a company. Now, wouldn't you think that the other companies, now that you have, you know, the United States backing it on their reserve currency, coming into this a little late? So you still have an opportunity to come in. I mean, it's kind of hard to be a whole coiner at this point.
Right.
But you still have an opportunity to come in and at least put 5,000, at least put 10,000 in. And then if it does go to $1 million, you'd have a 10x return. So if you had 10,000, it could go to 100,000, and you have that as your reserve, right? Because here's an interesting, you know, quote to always live by. You live off the interest, not the principal. So if you could go get other people's money and get loans from the bank, you could still leave your piggy bank to the side and then get a loan against your crypto so that you always just have a crypto reserve. Because
True.
if you hold your crypto, first things first, you got to get a ledger and make sure that it's, you know, offline, because Mt. Gox went down, FTX went down, Coinbase gets hacked, Hyperverse, Luna. There's all these projects and potentials, not your keys, not your coin. You want to make sure that it's the same thing why you don't want to just give the bank all your money.
Well, let me ask you this question. I did dabble a little bit myself on a personal level. And would you agree that anybody that's going to invest in crypto must have some knowledge base in the digital space? In other words, they have to be comfortable on a computer. They have to remember their username and password. They have to go into their account and log what's happening on the analysis of their crypto acquisition. Do you agree with that?
This is what I would say. I would say that you can look at people like Michael Saylor, who is leading MicroStrategy, who is one of the largest publicly traded companies, and, you know, putting full vested interest in his shareholders that are in this older generation to understand that there's custodian companies that you could put your money into. There's also ETFs now where you're able to diversify and put it into financial custody, which will allow them to be able to do the due diligence. It allowed them to be able to be the custodian of your
Oh,
your
really?
asset. Because
Okay.
if you're not, you know, proficient in the space yet, there are avenues now and legal railways that are opening up the ability for the average investor to know nothing, put it in the custodian's hands, and then have their financial advisor, who is now advising crypto, which they weren't before,
That's true.
allow them to be able to diversify into a different basket of cryptocurrencies.
And I know we're going to keep collaborating, connecting, and I'm looking forward to elevating by knowing you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I do feel like I'm just getting started, honestly.
Of course.
I only started waking up maybe at 28. So like at 28, so now I've been awake for 6 years, I feel like. But every rotation around the sun, I'm just getting much further into development of self, and then just getting to that next level of like, okay, now that I understand this is giving me the flat, like now that I'm a 7-figure person, how do I quantum jump to 9? People. And then opportunities will come to me based off of the level that I'm thinking at. Because I'm thinking 10 figures, but I want to quantum jump to 9 because I know where I'm aiming. But there's the action steps leading up to it, knowing that I can just say, all right, well, if I get into business acquisition and I diversify my crypto, I'm already 7 figures. If I transition into 9 figures, I would have to have a $100 million product. So we look at businesses that are 1 million to 2 million net, understand leveraging credit, get an SBA loan. So you go and look for a business. Why are businesses selling? Because there's 10,000 baby boomers retiring every single day. And their kids don't want to take over their business.
That's very true. If someone were to hand you $1 million and say, Zach, I'm hiring King Capital as my consultant.
King of capital.
King of capital.
Yes.
I'm hiring King of capital to be my consultant.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do with this $1 million, and how long is it going to take?
So if you had $1 million and you came to me and said, hey, do something with it, I would look at a mergers and acquisition strategy and say, let's get 1 to 2 million net EBITDA companies in fragmented industries like construction, healthcare, e-com, pharmacies. Mm-hmm. You could also do non-emergency medical transportation. You could do med spas. Anything that's fragmented that could be purchased at a 3 to 4x multiple. And then the idea is to be able to have the ingredients to be able to bake the cake. Now, this is a brand new industry for me, but I'm diversifying with consultation. I bought into a $150 million fund.
Okay.
That's called 9-Figure Board Capital. And I ended up getting a general partner share so that I can learn what they're learning, or basically what they're doing, so I can learn from the inside on how they're taking 10 industries and putting 80 companies in these 10 verticals and then selling to Goldman Sachs or Carlyle and then having a 10 to $15 billion exit. And even if I just have, 1% share, it's a great opportunity for me to learn from the inside to get dividends and then also see how they're doing in M&A.
Wonderful.
So because I had appreciation of my crypto portfolio, I was like, well, I don't want to go and put it back into real estate because real estate's just watching paint dry. It's a little slow for me. Not that it's not good for people, and there's a lot of people doing good in it. I just know that there's people doing bigger numbers in private equity and in mergers and acquisition. So if I had somebody come to bring me $1 million and I, wanted to utilize that for a percentage and, advise them, I would then say, hey, look, I want to be on your board of advisory and I want to be your integrator. Because if there's 3 forms of a business, of a role, there's a visionary, a builder, and an integrator. If I could step in as a fractional CMO and say, hey, look, you're going to hire somebody to do your CRM, you're going to hire somebody to do your SEO, you're going to hire somebody for sales and marketing, and have those systems put in place for your website and your media buying. All of these things are CMO worthy for you to be giving equity. Now, you could do it without equity, but to have me come in and consult you and have, my resources, my background, and my network, and then be able to implement systems that I know, I would negotiate equity in your company and say, hey, let's implement this $1 million. First things first, let's get debt capital. So we're only going to take $800,000 of that, and we're going to go acquire a company for $8 million at a 4x multiple. Let's just say construction, to keep it simple. And we're now going to have $200,000 to the side because we're not going to use all of it. So we have a little bit of play money. But that $800,000 is going to go get us an $8 million debt note. But now that business is doing $2 million net. So now we have a business doing $180,000 a month, roughly.
Right.
That's net coming in. Now you can't go, if you put down $800,000 on a house or a building, are you going to make $2 million a year net that you can verify?
Probably not.
Not likely. But how are you going to verify that this company is going to make you $2 million net? Well, the reason why it got evaluated at $8 million for us to buy it is because we had our CPAs ask their CPAs and sign an NDA for their financials, and they had to have been in business for 5 to 7 years. So now we have validated that they have that income coming in. So now it's a lot harder to mess up that system. So now you know that your $800,000 is going towards an $8 million debt note because it only takes 10% for an SBA for a small business administration loan, right?
Sure.
So now you have the taxes, and now they're much more likely to give you the loan because now you have their 10% that they went down, and now you're validating that you can pay that loan back because you have the taxes, the tax returns.
Right. Well, this is where our network of business brokers is going to be very important, and because you also, the business brokers are providing you the available businesses for sale.
Mm-hmm, which is also a commissionable good.
And
because now I'm stepping in a consultancy role and being like, look, I know where to get the business as well. And now it's like being a realtor, which you do have to have a real estate license
Yes, I believe you do.
to be able to broker businesses, which is interesting because it's not
I'm surprised you haven't become a realtor yet.
No, I am.
You are a realtor.
Yeah. No,
wonderful.
Because I understood that I don't sell houses.
So the business broker can legally provide you a commission when you help identify the business.
You could legally get it anyway. It's not real estate.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, I love, you know what I'm seeing? I mean, you are going to write a book about how all these puzzle pieces work together, right? This is a literal roadmap that you're building for our audience today.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing that I could say the roadmap is making sure you get your credit. If you already have it, you get the LLCs, you build your business credit, you get credit lines, you use OPM, you go acquire a system, at least doing 1 million net. And with that 1 million net company, you buy it at a 3 to 4x or maybe 5x on the high end, 3 to 5 million. You're running 10% down, so you need 300,000 to 500,000. Typically, you want a little bit more than that just for operating capital.
Right.
But you're going to go acquire a company, at least doing 1 million net, so then you can pay it back. At, what is it going to take you? If it's 92,000 per month that you're getting net, how long is it going to take you to pay back 400,000? 5 months?
Yeah.
Let's just say 6 because you take some of the money yourself.
Right.
Right? So it takes you half a year. So in your first year, let's just look at acquiring your first company in the first 6 months. You do the due diligence, you have the company, takes you 6 months to pay it back. Now, what would you logically think to do after you got the money back?
Okay, buy another one.
Exactly, because then you could roll it up. It's called a roll-up strategy. Because now you have the ingredients for the cake. If you're looking at the end goal in mind, your end goal in mind is not to work these things, it's to sell them.
Well, let me ask you this. Someone's watching this and they're saying, how do I know which business to buy? How do I know it's the right business? How do I know the due diligence is really accurate? And let's start with that question. You're going to help them decide which business to buy?
Of course.
And let's say you suggested, let's go basic, construction. What do you say? You know, I'm playing devil's advocate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about construction. So why would I buy a construction company? I have no education in it. I'm an attorney, but I know nothing about construction.
Okay, so let's just say you want to do it in financial services and professional services because you're an attorney and it's your background. Even if you weren't an attorney and you had a financial and professional services, which is an industry that I'm actually going to be doing for my first roll-up in fall. I'm not an attorney, but I definitely, I could spit game like one.
Oh,
and with ChatGPT,
no question about that.
I could definitely be my own
Please,
paralegal
when it comes out that you don't have to go to law school, but you can take the bar, you have to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in financial and professional services,
Yes.
or construction, you have a role called the COO, Chief Operating Officer. So now if you have somebody that's in a position to be able to take over this business that understands the operations, that is the person that you go and speak to.
Well, this is where this is where the recruiting pillar of the roadmap becomes important. Are you going to help the entrepreneur find the COO?
Here's what's interesting about a $1 million to $2 million net company. They have them in place.
So we're basically inheriting the existing team.
And if they're not doing well enough, you hire them.
I have an interesting question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you find a company that you like. For me, hypothetically, are you going to do a spiritual diagnosis on the work culture of the people that work there to make sure they are operating at maximum levels?
100%. There is a understanding that you're going to do due diligence on multiple companies. Just because the financials look right and your CPA is validating the due diligence on it and your attorney's overviewing, the structuring of everything, doesn't mean you necessarily want it. You want to make sure that the brand's good. You want to make sure that you're understanding the lifeline of the people is like what's going to keep that brand going. And you want to have the, solid core base of the people that are involved. You want to go meet who the managers are. You want to go meet the employees. You want to go see how everything's situated. Let's just say you're acquiring a CPA firm. Usually a CPA firm that's doing $1 million to $2 million net, that's only about 3 to 6 employees for CPAs. Very small team.
I believe that.
Now, $1 million to $2 million net construction company, completely different. You're talking about, potentially 10 to 30 employees.
Right.
Of subcontractors too.
It sounds like for the regular entrepreneur, buying a company that's doing this well. I mean, I could see one of the major objections being their lack of experience in management. But your response is you don't need to worry about management because the level of caliber of the company that's being bought will have this intrinsic structure already.
You're buying a system. You're not buying a job.
Absolutely. You are buying a system. And of course, you as an integrator strategist are going to ensure that that the standard operating procedures of this purchase are up to par.
And of course, if they don't have SEO integrated, if they don't have media buying integrated, if they don't have social media marketing integrated, if they don't have their marketing funnels, their website, those are things where they need an integrator, which if you want to have a hired hand come in and then create your automation processes, how do you think you're going to scale from 1 million to 3 to 6? You're going to go through a break point, which that business owner did not figure out. That's why they kept hitting their head. 95% of all the businesses end up being in that million net mark, and they never transition to 3 to 6. A lot of them don't know that it's actually the people and the who and the what. And then it gets into these automation processes that take them to 100 million, that take them to 1 billion. And I only understand these processes because I went to the Grant Cardone community and I learned that there was breakpoints and mergers and acquisitions.
Well, tell us more about that. What is a breakpoint? What does that mean?
I mean, that's a lot to dwell into, but it's just understanding that there's a majority of the businesses that get to 1 million net end up getting stuck there and then selling their business because they didn't think to do mergers and acquisitions to scale to then have a $100 million product.
Wow.
Where if you got to 1 million net, why wouldn't you just go put 400,000 down and then, or even 800,000 down, 400 being that you buy another million net company because you put 10% down, 800 being that you get 2 million net. You could double your business just with the revenue if you were able to afford putting down the whole year, right?
Absolutely.
But they don't think to double down on expanding their customer base by acquiring their competitors. And the only reason why they're selling is because they're trying to retire.
I think a lot of the reason that people don't expand goes back to the fundamental law of life of a network. They have no connection.
It's also lack of imagination.
Absolutely. So we need people in our life to expand. We need to know business brokers. We need to know realtors. We need to know marketers. We need to know lawyers. We need to know self-development experts. We need to know meditators. We need so many categories of connection to get us to the highest level. It's a lot of puzzle pieces to put together. What are your thoughts on marketing strategy?
I mean, marketing strategy is this understanding that marketing is senior to sales. If you set up a funnel with Go High Level or ClickFunnels, and you have a structure to be able to bring people into the bigger part of the funnel, and then you can put them through the sales processes of understanding, infomercials, webinar jam to be able to automatically sell your product so you don't have to be selling it all the time.
Yeah.
You're going to educate people and then bring them into a understanding of, hey, I'm interested in your product. You gave me more information. And then they're emotionally going through the sale process themselves so that when they do book a call, they're already pre-qualified.
Absolutely. That was definitely, I would think, some of the most important principles from the Grant Cardone background. All right, so let's go. I know we talk about the CRM. And so that's where you're taking the lead and you're continuing through automated communications, cultivating them through email distribution, social media, and SMS, all of those vehicles?
Yeah, you would be nurturing the lead into a sale. And then obviously you would want to continue to hold on to the client for lifetime value because you're not just trying to get the sale and let them go. You're trying to keep them in your community, in your ecosystem so that you can, Apple doesn't just sell you the iPod. They sell you the iPhone. They sell you Apple Music. They sell you the laptop. They sell you the upgrade. They sell you the tablet. You're in an ecosystem. Your lifetime value of your customer, you've probably spent, if you bought a new phone like I have every single year, you spent, multiple 4 figures, if not 5 figures with Apple already.
Let's talk about source of leads for any company. In your experience, what is the most critical source of finding a lead?
I mean, the most critical source of finding of a lead is the internet. If you're not getting, word of mouth is always great, but having the other side of understanding internet marketing, the Internet of Things is there to understand that they collect data so that they know what people want. They already know what the buying habits of your potential client are. And there's agencies and there's lead vendors that are going to provide those for you so then you can put those through your funnel. It's just really about going through your Google and your Meta and your TikTok and your different, because you have social media, and then you have search engines, and then obviously you can position yourself to do email marketing. You can position yourself to do text. You could do seminars. You could host events. You could, do giveaways. Like, there's so many different avenues of producing a lead of what you want.
Sure.
It's just making sure that you're zoned in on who's my customer.
So you're totally in favor of a Google ad strategy?
I think there's different strategies for every single industry. It depends on what you're looking at. But I think that most of the time, if you're looking to go B2C, I think that, Google Ads is probably a good route. B2B, I think sometimes people end up going the event route, or, where they go and become a vendor, and then they, seek out vendors that way. It really just depends on the industry.
Do you have any bad habits?
Do I have bad habits? I would say some of my bad habits would be potentially, sleeping in whenever I want, not having a full structured circadian rhythm. I don't go to sleep at 10 o'clock. So I could be asleep at 10 o'clock sometimes. I'll be asleep at 3 in the morning. I don't know if that's a bad habit.
Okay. Is that something you'd like to change about yourself?
For right now, no.
Okay, what other
bad
bad habits, if you're open to sharing?
If I had another bad habit, I would probably say it's, focusing on probably, relaxing and like drinking or smoking weed, or it's I don't know if that's necessarily a bad habit, but it's health wise, it's probably not the healthiest thing to do. If I just stop drinking or smoking weed, or, just all drugs completely.
What's your drink of choice?
Tequila, but I'm not a heavy drinker.
Of course. Now, do you think that smoking weed is something we need to be worried about for teens in this country?
I don't know. It's like saying, is it bad for them to smoke nicotine? Nicotine's the gateway to everything. Sugar really is, but then it ends up turning into alcohol's fine, nicotine's fine, but is it?
Do you work out?
Yeah, of course.
What's your regimen in the gym? Or you go to the gym, you're a beach person?
I like to do both. I'll go to the gym, I'll do Pilates, I'll do yoga, I'll do breath work. I work out in my home. I get my 10,000 steps in per day.
Wow.
Yeah.
You use the Apple phone, the Apple Watch to track all your...
No, I just turned on the settings on your phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. What about marriage? Do you see yourself getting married?
I feel like my philosophy with relationships has changed towards prioritizing procreation and not necessarily being tied to the philosophy of one wife. So, being that I'm in between Dubai and Miami, in Dubai you can have 4 wives. So, I've come to learn that as long as I'm able to financially provide, I don't know if I necessarily would put the burden of having 8 children on one woman.
So you want to have a lot of children. That's one of your dreams.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the base creator things is procreating, and then being able to financially, provide for all of them, and then still have a family. So could I find a girl that probably would want 8? Maybe. Could I adopt? Maybe, but I'd rather have my own DNA. So I'd probably just have, a few wives and then have 2 with each.
So you definitely are not a proponent of monogamy.
I don't think a proponent of monogamy is within the human psyche, being a lion by nature. I think religion kind of confines us into that. And royalty ended up being the ones that were only the privileged ones of having that kind of built into their philosophy.
How would you make your decision as to who you would marry out of, so say, okay, I have a vision. I want 4 wives. What would each wife have a different departmental area of education, beauty?
I mean, it definitely all have to have beauty. That's like that's a standard. I would say that emotional intelligence is pretty big because I've been on my fair share of dates where you can tell when, something small can set somebody off versus, having emotional intelligence and being able to communicate. And then communication is also like really high up there. So emotional intelligence, communication, beauty is obviously critical. I don't think education really has anything to do with, I could be with somebody that's not necessarily like college because they could be versed in business.
Of course.
But also that's a masculine thing. So do they necessarily have to think in business? Do I need an attorney for a wife? Maybe. But an attorney for a wife, I also could be a headache if she ends up getting mad at me.
It would save you a fortune on legal fees.
Yeah, but also
you could save like 10 million over 10 years.
Here's the thing too, is AI unfortunately is coming for that job.
Yeah.
So there would be an advisory role of having relationships, but AI 100% is coming for that role. It's already past the bar, So AI has already proven it can replace a paralegal. And as soon as it becomes automated and general intelligence comes on board, you're about to probably, have AI replace your employees at that point, because then why would you pay an employee to be your paralegal if it's just document submission and document preparation? You're giving it data sets. It's pulling all the references that it needs, preparing the documents for you then to go delegate.
Well, there's definitely some elements that AI is definitely going to replace. For example, legal research, motion drafting. I think that the biggest challenge with AI and law is the integration of the facts and the creative imagination of leveraging the facts to apply to the case law. Is it possible? Yes, but I think that the human lawyer and the emotional intelligence will still be necessary in the practice of law. Also, the other challenge, obviously in a jury trial, someone has to try the case.
Mm-hmm.
So many people, what percentage of society do you think doesn't even have fundamental digital skills?
That'd be hard to be able to pinpoint. I just know that there's a good chunk of the world that needs to be banked and get access to like banking, and crypto is opening that door. But as far as like the lawyer's concerned, I 100% see that being a Tesla bot showing up and then presenting the fact, and then the only necessity would be the jury for the emotional intelligence to discern the facts.
Well, it's like the jury are the assessors of credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be interesting how AI would analyze credibility. They would look at the background of the witness. They would look at their testimony. Well, AI would be easier able to identify inconsistencies in the testimony of that witness and in comparison to other witnesses in the case. Mm-hmm. It's definitely going to be a fascinating development in the practice of law. But going back to emotional intelligence, how do you define that?
I think emotional intelligence would be correlated to understanding being less reactive and more responsive. Because just because something happens to you doesn't mean you need to react. You can respond. And that slower initiation of violence or emotional outbreak, or just how you handle pressure in general, it shows in time, what you would be like as a potential parent. Because, you don't necessarily need to spank your kids in order to discipline them, or, just understanding how to use neurolinguistic programming and make them develop that response mechanism as a muscle memory from an earlier stage in life, because they're modeling what they're learning it from. They're learning it from their environment. They're learning from their parents. So really having that, just mental fortitude and sense of peace, where something could happen just because the kid spills the Cheerio bowl and the milk goes all over. doesn't mean you necessarily need to be like, what are you doing wrong? You know?
I like that. I really do. I have a law of life. I call it the 24-hour rule. I believe that when something causes you to want to react with lack of patience, anger, anxiety, disrespect, to wait 24 hours, because many times you have to look at, is the reaction caused by hunger, some type of trauma that you went through, lack of sleep, can cause us to be very reactive. And if I wait the 24 hours, then I'm able to process what happened and then respond better. Like, I never send an email when I'm angry. And listen, I'm human. We all, or a text message. What's your opinion on the 24-hour rule?
I mean, that's a good general rule of thumb, because I've definitely started to get more aggressive when it comes to business relationships and having access to ChatGPT. And I'll consult with it first and being like, well, this business partner is doing this, and then I'm not getting the response I need, and it's in a corporate structure, and I'm trying to make sure that I have, my general interest, backed. What kind of legal remedies would I, be able to seek if this didn't happen in this scenario? And then I'm like writing emails, and all of a sudden, like, the people I'm doing business with are like, well, are you structuring a lawsuit against us? And I'm like, yes, I am, because I want to make sure that if your emotional intelligence leads you into all of a sudden cutting communication when we're supposed to be on a, level of understanding, and there's still a company involved, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence. But also I come back to the email and I'm like, damn, like, I'm writing them a book with AI, but it's also like a paralegal structure. So then I'm like literally already prepared to just hand that document over to a lawyer and be like, look, you wouldn't want to handle it with me just sending you a few sentences, where it was like us free flowing in communication. So now that I'm structuring it this way, I do think that my approach changes after the first 24 hours, because then afterwards I look at my email and I'm like, yeah, that was great. But then I'm like, oh man, they're not responding because it's so lengthy. And then I'm like, if I would have just, and I always have to like ask AI, I'm like, make sure that it takes the tonality of understanding that I'm trying to be, less confrontational and more collaborative, and trying to resolve with amicability.
Absolutely. One of my philosophies is, when someone isn't performing, I always start with just a basic phone call. And because I find if I jump to the documentation, it does cause that alienation, defensiveness, and then it becomes harder to solve whatever problem lies in front of us. But I am a big fan of documenting the dialogue. That's one of my biggest laws of life as a lawyer. And I always tell people, don't text, email, because in litigation, it's virtually impossible, if not really difficult, to get those text messages assembled, to get them from the service provider, to admit them into evidence. It's a nightmare. So if you are going to document, do it through email.
100%. And that's why I'm glad I do consult with ChatGPT, because 100% it went from text when it wasn't getting addressed to then demand letters in email structure saying, hey, these are documents that I need, or structure of the conversation to direct it towards the desired goal. Like, hey, I'm trying to be collaborative here. What's going on? Why am I not getting these things? And then still structuring it in a stance of like, I do mean business. So make sure that you understand when I ask you for things, they're getting done.
Absolutely. It also goes into that whole team model, right? Because if you have to keep asking for something multiple times, that's an indicator that it's probably not the right team member. Where do you stand on how many chances do you give a team member before you decide not to work with them?
I mean, it's interesting working with older men and being a younger man, and then seeing their emotional intelligence, and sometimes seeing that, working with older men, they're a little more stern and they can like immediately cut communication. I'm always open to seeing the other person's point of view, and then, first to, be apologetic and make sure there's some level of empathy, so that I can, be the first mover and showing, being at ease and allowing the emotional like resistance to just be like, hey, maybe I was wrong, even if, you know, you're the first person that cut communication. So allow me to be able to, you know, at least voice the potential of you just understanding that I see that I could potentially be in the wrong, so that we could come to a common ground.
Love that. What's your number one law of life when it comes to friends that no longer serve you? Do you
I would say the
quickly-
only friends that I truly inspire to really associate with and hang out with, like that I like are people that inspire me, because I don't like people doing the same level as myself. I like people that are inspiring me to think more and bigger. And there's just more opportunities for me to go befriend a billionaire or a 100-millionaire and then have like a bunch of unique things. Like I may not be able to afford to keep up with them all the times, but if I can get in the same room and the proximity, and sometimes they end up having that access that, you know, maybe I wasn't able to have myself, or I was able to use my brand to be able to, you know, at least stand by their side, where they felt like I was a person of value, and then somehow being able to expand on their goals or their dreams, or just kind of see like what their filter is. Because sometimes it's not always business that ends up making you, you know, befriend them. It's maybe just like your imagination and your ability to like free flow and allow somebody to be heard. Because I could take something that you're thinking about in your field and then expand on your dream, and we haven't even done any business where we've transacted and made, you know, an actual profit together. But we could speculate on something and then expand on something that you're currently working on, where I'm just like, all right, well, I like your idea, but here's something that I'm currently working on and how we can synergize them. Or here's how I see from a different point of view, because we have a little bit of an age difference. So now I'm bringing a fresh perspective on being able to say, hey, you know, even if I'm not as experienced in your field of, you know, walk of life, I can still give you a fresh idea based off of our subconscious pooling and then going into the unified field. And, you know, our subconscious are pooled because we're in proximity to each other. So that means the thoughts that you have, I already have. And
Wow.
and that just means that most of the stuff that's divinely coming out of me in the word form is potentially from your subconscious too. And we end up just sharing a conversation on a collaborative effort of our thoughts.
I've never heard that law of life before. I didn't know that my thoughts could so quickly influence your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting.
That's like the mirror neuron of like, it's osmosis. Power is proximity. So being a water robot, all I need to do is be in proximity of your field, and I already know what you know.
It's incredible. That's inspiring. Speaking of getting in the room, that was one of the laws of life I learned from Grant Cardone. He always said, get in the room, get in the room. There's going to be an open door. There's going to be an opportunity. You've touched on that a lot. Do you agree with that law of life?
100%. I do feel like the rooms that my feet keep bringing me into end up being where other people are making that same decision. And that's a big decision. When you travel and you go to a place, you know, people that talk about ideas are not as great as people that talk about where they're going. So if you talk about events, that's my thing. I feel like further education, because, you know, doing general education through college, I was going and sitting in a room. I was going for computer science, and I was at that point in my life smoking weed in high school, and then going and listening to these general education, you know, professors that were making 50 to 70,000 a year, looking at them like, why would I even listen to what you're saying if you're teaching me what was in high school? And I'm just relearning these general education to then earn something that's not going to get me where I actually want to get monetarily. Like, so I was like going through all these general credits. I got 33 credits, and then I left because I was like, I can just go make 150,000 a year doing construction, you know? So getting in the right room, I could have just skipped college and went straight to network marketing or direct sales, or, you know, going to a Grant Cardone seminar, or going to a Tony Robbins, or going to, you know, Bob Proctor, and doing subconscious work so that I could have already started instilling these business principles of the mindset, because the mindset at the end of the day is where the people are. Like, you get into Grant Cardone's rooms, it's $1,500 to $5,000 to $10,000 just to sit in the different bracketed seating positions, which then puts a barrier of entry. Obviously, you have to have a little bit of success beforehand leading into, getting into those rooms. But the reality is like getting in the right rooms will change everything for you.
So you agree that it's a perfectly prudent decision to pay to get into a room if it's a good room.
I always pay to get in the right room. And if I can't collaborate and use my brand, which I've basically paid to be able to be in the room first time because I spent it on myself, which I always tell people, take 10% of your income, put it on your brand, if not 20, because you will see if you do press relations and get yourself in the media and control the narrative on your SEO on Google, and then you also understand social media marketing and you put these systems in place, how it opens doors. Because I think number one, what are we doing having this podcast? You are telling stories, having people to relate to the stories, bringing people to become illuminated on what could help them with their laws of life, right? So one of the laws of life that I feel like really gave me that pivotal moment to get in the room is my brand. And understanding when I was in Wisconsin as a construction worker, and then I transitioned into network marketing, my upline, which is basically the sponsor, would say, build your brand because it'll help you sell other people. And I really didn't have that mentality. And I had a lot of resistance when I first was like, ooh, do I spend $2,500 on my brand? Ooh, do I spend $10,000? But then it got addicting because then I'm like, okay, now perception's starting to match reality because now I put myself up on a pedestal. Now I build in this internal image of myself and I'm not edging, a part of me out by attaching my identity to this ego. I'm, still developing as a person. I'm not just this ego like, oh, I'm this big famous person, because I'm definitely, not the best marketer. I'm not the biggest brand influencer. I'm not, but I know that I understand enough about marketing to tweak the perception in this field so that when somebody comes to my page, they're like, wait a minute, there's something different here. And that gets them to pause.
Exactly.
And if I can take attention, attention's a currency. So for me, that has opened up a lot of doors. And I only understood this one thing. You're worth it. Spend the money on yourself because you'll see the results afterwards, even if it doesn't produce an income, because press won't give you an income right away, but it will change perception, and perception starts to match reality. So when I started to do press relations and then get into, a company called Credibility X Media, and now I'm the North American representative. It's one of the largest media companies doing 50 million net in Dubai. It's got 200 staff members. It's been in business for 15 years. So when I had somebody pull from the Matrix, from Instagram, somebody, a 9-figure person, never met me before, pull me from Instagram and say, hey, by the way, I see you're in all the right rooms, but I want you to represent my company in North America. That was just one of the hats where I'm like, well, I'm already building my brand and kind of, telling people a little bit how to build their brand. This is an attribute that allow me to help be a CMO for somebody that is a lawyer or a doctor or somebody that's in the space that doesn't necessarily need millions of followers, but they still want brand representation for their company and controlling the narrative online.
That is extraordinary. Congratulations on that. Congratulations on designing a brand that attracted such a high-powered company, and not only an international company at that. So clearly you have a lot of marketing experience. Clearly you believe that building social media is one of the key pillars of building the brand. What is your advice on how to attract more people to pause on the page and to follow?
I would just say make sure that you're being your authentic self. Okay. Honestly, you do more reels, more videos. Videos are obviously the best thing you can do for getting people to stay there longer. A picture, they can just flip, and then gone. Video, you do 30 seconds. They're stuck there for 30 seconds if they get hooked into the beginning. So, and then obviously structuring it so that you understand the sales psychology. Having a hook, having a body, having a conclusion, having a call to action, and then embedding neurolinguistic programming with calls of action. Because you can say, go to my Instagram at Zach Czerkas on all platforms. And then you're already there because I can embed a call to action where you can find me. And then if you have a product or offer, you can be like, all right, well, here we're brought to you by purified water. You know, they all of a sudden get free brand exposure because you do a name drop of a brand. It's just embedding things within the flow of conversation, because back to 80% being customers, 15% being distributors, 5% being full-time distributors, 80%, they're not going to do anything unless you tell them what to do. You got to guide them. So you might as well be the lighthouse. You might as well be the shepherd. And you might as well tell them, hey, go follow at King of Capital if you want to fix your credit and get funding.
Love that. I'm a huge proponent of it, and I agree. Authenticity is so important. Do you believe that any business should have all of the pillars: social media, SEO, Google ads, Facebook ads, email distribution, or do you think every business should handpick the pillars?
I think all of those are critical pillars, but I think revenue is the biggest thing. So if you're going to go evaluate a company, which is great, you could just take this one thing. Let's just say your money paradigm is not where it needs to be, and you want to get to 1 million net. Let's break down how simple this is. You find a company that's doing 1 million net that has 5 to 7 years of their taxes, and you know that you're going to make 92,000 net per month. Now, let's say they don't have SEO. Let's say they don't have a good website. Let's say they don't have email marketing. Let's say they have never done any ad spend. You would say if you added those verticals to that, 100%, it's going to synergize it, and you have the potential to grow the company further. That is a very high probability with the older generations not understanding traditional marketing, which is a great opportunity for you to step in, be a traditional marketer, understand having somebody like myself that's an integrator come into your business, stand on your board, ask for equity, because you're going to be able to integrate these systems to then scale to the next level, go through a break point, and then have a few of these companies that are lacking SEO, a few of these companies that are lacking media buying, be able to synergize them, get their brand congruency, have our media company represent them, and be able to control the narrative, have somebody that understands social media shift that perception as well, and then all of a sudden have a basket to be able to sell, because now you've built up the brands that were unique and individual, had longevity, but they just didn't have the extra systems in place to go to the next level.
It sounds like a very wise, thought out strategy. It makes sense, but clearly you're going to be a consultant to the people that go under your wing, and you're going to guide them because you have incredible knowledge in a wide range of areas, from marketing to sales to emotional intelligence to spirituality to manifestation to meditation to fitness, so many different areas. What do you think is your greatest talent?
I think my greatest talent is to get in the room and then to be my authentic self, to be able to network and be able to make people feel my energy so that they remember me and then want to follow back. Because like I've learned in the fashion realm, in my suit game, I didn't wear a suit today. It's very hot.
It is very hot. And you look great.
Thank you. But I realized, like, if you ever see me at an event, I'm an outlier. And I step out of the people pile, like John Maxwell says, and I make sure that my fashion sense and suit game is so unique that I don't look like an insurance rep. I don't look like I'm going to a funeral. I don't look like I'm going to a wedding. I can be not only a person that understands branding and attention and social media, but also my fashion sense then also lures in people that are looking at me in the room, because then they're like observant, like, well, why does this guy got a Gucci suit on? Or why does this guy got a Louis Vuitton or a Fendi suit on? And not necessarily the vanity of like, oh, I think I'm better by buying these designer things. Or maybe it's just been my generation, because I know that these things are more fashionably sensible, whereas like unique.
Right.
You know, I started getting custom tailored suits where at least even if I wasn't going to the retailer, I was going into the fabric and then having my tailor make them. So I was leveraging then my ability to understand, like, okay, in e-com, you go source it from other places, then you sell it for a retail price. Why would I go buy a retail suit if I can source the material, have my tailor make it, and then it still presents being the authority of designer inspired. And then now all of a sudden I have a fashionable sense that makes me in the 1% in the room. And now all of a sudden I'm stealing attention because you see me walk in and you're like, well, I didn't meet this guy yet, but I see him shaking hands with a bunch of people. Back to the network marketing background, understanding taprooting. It's okay if you don't want to buy something from me because you're going to introduce me to somebody that will. And it's sell or be sold. And I'm a seller. So I'm going to make sure I climb the ladder and then taproot your network and be like, all right, well, I can see in your point of your journey, there's nothing that really you would like to exchange monetary wise, but that still doesn't break the relation.
Of course.
You know, how long have we known each other? And I still haven't tried to sell you anything.
It's been 3 to 4, I think a couple of years now.
But I have plenty of things to sell you.
Well, oh, well, wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
I can tell you that just going through this experience, we've known each other for at least 3 or 4 years. You've come to many of my events. You've always shown up for me. I've gone to many of yours. But this conversation, I'm so grateful for it because I'm learning so much more. I'm enhancing my education, and I'm also learning what are the gaps in my education. What do I want to learn more about? So again, thank you. It's a blessing to have you here. But there was another question I was going to ask you, and it related to the law of life you had just highlighted, which was right before you got into the root tapping conversation. Fashion. Mm-hmm. Is fashion a critical element of building a successful brand?
I feel like fashion for me was my opportunity to meet the most attractive women and men in the world. That it's just nice to be around attractive people. So being that I don't have, a wife or wives, I could get into modeling and then have that opportunity to be able to, have that open door. Like, these people casted the best talent. If I get casted too and I'm walking and using my marketing page, which is my Instagram, to open that door, because I'm not just a model then at that point, I'm a marketer. Because when they have these castings, they say, let me see your casting card or your Instagram. Well, here's an interesting thing is like, I've never created a casting card because I didn't position or think myself as just a model. I gave them my Instagram, and every time the Instagram has opened up the door.
Sounds like
versus the models then go there and have the expectation that they have to go in competition against the people there and hand them the casting card. I just give them my Instagram because I already know what they're looking for. They're looking for a collaboration of views. And if you can get the views and you understand the attention, then I understand fashion. Right?
Exactly.
And then obviously getting fashionable things and wearing latest trending things would then also end up, elevating my ability then to call upon the attention, which is the currency that I'm looking for anyway.
I love how you put that. So, and what I also get out of that is put yourself in different scenarios and utilize those scenarios to leverage further attention and create additional connections. You also said that you feel that you have a special fired up energy, which I agree with. Is it the personal development that created that special fire inside of you that people respond to?
I feel like when you reboot your subconscious and you get in the room more frequently, it's like going to church and you can feel the Holy Spirit, or you can feel like the Spirit being woken in you, right? If you get in the room of entrepreneurship, that spirit starts to just get more and more lit. And then you have this halo about you. You have this aura, because then your subconscious gets so much more broad and in depth of the well of who you are, because you are the collective mind of the people that you're associating to. And you have all these minds that are brilliant, that are going in the same direction. They're all thinking about personal development. The Grant Cardone community is one of the best communities that I've found by far, where I've found people that are doing 20 million to 50 million net, and they're there sitting in the seat and networking with other people. And I'm like, if I'm paying to be in the room and there's these type of people here, I have to be in the right room. Now, given there's people that are unconscious competence that end up selling companies for hundreds of millions, and they have data downloads and they're literally just, walking through flow state, and that happens, but that's rare. But if you really do start to associate and know where the eagles are roosting, I could go into any location in the countries and find the richest people in the world because I know that they're at a networking event. I know that they're doing personal development. I know that they're learning about marketing and sales. I know that they're learning about spiritual awakening and transcendental meditation or hypnosis or neurolinguistic programming. I'll go to the crypto conventions like Token 2049, like I was just in Dubai, and going to the future of finance and seeing the people that have these big, massive companies that have 100 million or 100 billion market cap, and then knowing which players are in the space that are in the forefront of the technology boom, so that if I go to a place where they're not and I start to talk about crypto, there's another place where everybody, it's the norm. So instead of just putting yourself in a situation where you're like feeling like you're an alien and you're like, oh, well, I went to this yoga retreat and nobody's talking about cryptocurrency. I wonder why.
So how do you acclimate? What's your law of acclimation? So let's say I say, hey, Zach, I just got invited to an incredible event in Palm Beach. There's going to be 25 billionaires in the room. You have 60 seconds to introduce yourself to those 25 billionaires in one moment. What do you say?
To the 25 billionaires, I would say that, I'm obviously already built brand. My brand has been built to the point where only, I want to say 0.76 or so percent have 1 million plus followers. So I'm already in the 1% of the 1%.
Okay.
So that alone is an understanding that I can bring to the table and say, if you're a billionaire, you probably have multiple brands that you're building. And a social media side, I could then come in and collaborate on just more awareness and expanding on the social media front for your marketing team. So I would position myself of value and say, hey, I understand marketing to a certain degree on the social media side, where maybe I could, throw some ideas and, listen to the value that you have so that maybe I could contribute to what you have going on. Because my idea might not be as expansive as yours because you've already lived life lessons and you've already hit financial, new levels that I'm looking to aspire myself. So in that case, I would, be there listening more than speaking. And I would just see if I could add value with the certain things that I know are rare, because there's a small percentage of the population that understands how to get to where I am in the marketing realm. And not necessarily that, I'm making the most revenue for my brand. Like there's other brands that could be making more from 10,000 followers. But there's an understanding of controlling perception, controlling your brand, controlling the narrative with press relations, and then understanding, elevating how to become actually a public figure and structuring the brand narrative when you control Google.
So you are an entrepreneur, a visionary, an influencer. Your greatest gift being to attract people with your energy and create valuable collaborations. What is your number one law of life?
My number one law of life is to make sure that you think bigger sooner. Because if you confine yourself in the limitations of the physical, you would forget that you're an offspring of a deathless soul and that you're a king's son, you're a king's daughter, and you have the ability to connect to source. And I believe there's only 3 different forms of real data in life. It's understanding that your epigenetics, that's your blood, your lineage from your family, from your father's side and your mother's side, your past lives, your past deaths, the past famines, the past everything that could be possibly like in your DNA. That's one form of data. Then you have the data of the noise. You can hear the fan. There's a conversation happening outside, even though we're in a studio, right? There's cars. There's the highway. There's just all the noise that's kind of distracting you in the physical realm. And then understanding that you are a spirit and then you come from source and you have to connect to that data and then connect within and then just have that law of life of being able to discern the noise from your blood, be able to reprogram this body, this vessel, with the power that you're the intuition of light and love and connection So if you have a law of life, is to connect within, connect to source, be present, be grateful, and then literally just breathe and understand that you have everything in your power to think bigger sooner.
I truly love that. Well, this has been an incredible, valuable, and highly educational conversation. Thank you so much. Everyone, be sure to follow Zach Czerkas on Instagram. And remember to keep thinking big. Thanks for watching.